Everyone, happy Sunday to you. I hope all is well. I wanted to touch base with you this week as we're coming up on the halfway point. So let me, before I get to the treatment setting DBs, let me just go over some simple housekeeping rules or guidelines or instruction, however you choose to label that. Right? I feel like I go over these every week and they're not being heard, which is okay. It's your grade that you get, so that's up to you. Just remember that, guys. You get the grade of the work you put in, right? Many of you are, I know our class is small, but many of you are just leaving points on the table, like not doing your peer replies. That's just giving away points. So I'm in fear that you're going to find yourself towards the end of the semester wondering how you don't have enough points, but you're just leaving points on the table. So be sure to tighten it up a little bit as we approach this halfway mark. I'm gonna really challenge all of you to really tighten up your game here, because in a professional setting you can't do things like that. You can't just be like, oh, it's fine, I'm willing to take the loss, or it's fine. You're working with people's lives. It's a very serious thing, and you got to tighten up your belts, guys, and do the work. So I just wanted to say that there's no reason to leave points on the table like that. So by now, you all know how this works. DBs aren't new. You've done several of them. The guidelines haven't changed. You know when things are due. If you don't, I'm going to encourage you, your college students, reach out to your syllabus. That's your lifeline. Several of you are doing fantastic. And that's fine. This isn't for you. But for everyone else that needs to, just tighten it up. And follow the instructions, follow the guidelines. There's no reason to not know how to do this at this point, because if you haven't reached out to me, I have to assume you know how to do this. So otherwise, please reach out to me and I'll do a Zoom or a phone call or whatever with you to walk you through the process, right? We also have Keontae Grantham that can help. We have a writing center. I want to encourage all of you, whether struggling or otherwise. We have a UST offers a counseling center, a wellness center. Take advantage of those free services. Every clinician needs a clinician. Start there, right? So that said, let me move on to the treatment settings in the DB. I worked in a treatment setting for about 9 years of my career. I loved it overall. I mean, it had its ups and downs like anything you're at for that long, but it was where I cut my teeth. It was where I learned how to be a professional. It was a great experience overall to serve this population. I still work with treatment centers as an interventionist and as a therapist. I'm very, very close with many centers. As I've mentioned before, always tour your centers. You want to lay eyes on where you're sending somebody, right? Where you're asking a client to go. Again, I need you to understand the magnitude of what we do, the ethical responsibilities of what we do. This class, speaking of ethical responsibility, is mental health, ethics, and addiction. And an ethical piece is to know these centers if you're going to be asking people to go. Don't just pull up Google and be like, oh, okay, go there. I mean, you can do that, yes, but is that really fair to your client? I want to give my client the best amount of expertise I can. That doesn't make me right every time. I don't have to be right every time, but I have to be knowledgeable. And if I'm not knowledgeable, I need to get knowledgeable, right? That's my ethical responsibility as an LCDC. So get to know your centers, get to know your business development reps. That's who's going to introduce you to the centers. That's who's going to tour you around the centers. Get to know what insurances they take. What philosophies are they? 12-step model? Do they offer smart recovery or refuge or celebrate? What kind of groups do they run? What's their schedules look like? What's the food like? What are the amenities like? What is the overall facility like? Do they have psychiatrists, doctors? There's a lot to know, right? Because everyone claims they treat dual diagnosis, but it's to what degree do they treat it, right? Like we talked about co-occurring disorders last week, and everybody claims they treat that, and they do to a certain extent, right? But what happens when they get to detox and the problem, then they realize it's a primary mental health issue? It happens, right? And in intervention work, often it happens where, you only get a short window with this family and these folks, and you go to get them to a center to sober up, and the mental health becomes the primary, and you have to make other arrangements. So know your centers. Know your resources. Super, super important. You have to be professional. You can't just like with these DBs, right? You can't just be like, I got one, it's fine, right? No. You have to have a robust resource list, right? A robust that not just a list that you have some places on. I can't stress that enough. And again, we're honored to and privileged to be working in people's lives, right? And I hope you take that serious, right? Pay attention to the rules. Okay, so that brings me to this. This is a great segue from the DBs and following the guidelines and posting them in the right way, presenting your resources, applying to your peers, the whole ball of wax, as they say, or the whole 9 yards, whatever you'd like to put in there, right? Doing it all and doing it professionally, writing in your APA. It sets a standard, right? Because when you are working at a treatment center, you're going to have deadlines. You're going to have standards to keep, because I'll give you an example of when I worked. The treatment center I worked at was called Memorial Hermann Park. It's no longer Memorial Hermann, right? A place called Discovery Behavioral now owns it. It's still called the Park. But I worked there 9 years, 3 years as a detox counselor, working weekends, off Tuesdays and Wednesdays. We can talk about that another time, ups and downs there. But then I went to outpatient, IOP. Did that for 4 years, 2 years young adult, 2 years general population, as I would call it. Then I worked everywhere in between, right? I got to know the UR department, the utilization review department, the BO, the business office, right? The admissions department. I got to know all of these and how they work together. But what you got to understand is, okay, so we as LCDCs have state rules and regulations. We also had Memorial Hermann Hospital System rules and regulations. Then we also had what's called Joint Commission rules and regulations. So most treatment centers, at least the legitimate ones, are accredited just like our colleges, right? And the Joint Commission is an accreditation body that monitors treatment centers and accredits them, right? So you had their rules and regulations, right? And then what happens if, like, I have an LPC license that has different rules than the LCDC license? So you have lots of detail to pay attention to. So while I know this may just be these DBs and these papers and these instructions and APA and all this whole thing may just be a task right now at this place, but I'm telling you, it's put in place for a reason, guys. You have to understand that when you get in the professional world, and I don't mean as a licensed counselor, I mean as a practicum student even, that represents our university, that represents our license and our field of study and work. I take that very serious. I'm very passionate about this. Substance use disorder, individuals with substance use disorder already get a bad rap, right? A lot of them. The industry gets sort of a bad rap. And we are stewards of that, just like we're stewards of this university. And we want to represent that. So tighten it up, right, on these instructions. 1. 2, if you need help, contact me. But 3, you have all of these things in a professional setting. And that's why this course is designed the way it is. That's why the rules are what they are, the guidelines are what they are, the instructions are what they are, to help prepare you as a counselor in training for what's coming, right? These things are coming. Treatment centers are very fast-paced, most of them. Memorial Hermann's was a very large treatment center, so some of the smaller ones, not as bad. But some of them are very, very fast-paced, small or not, right? You have groups all day, you have individuals, you got treatment plans, assessments, nonstop family calls, family meetings, referral source calls, right? Referral sources don't like it when you don't call. And believe it or not, it's a thing, because while you're focused on the client care, someone else has a crisis, your resource still wants to know, why hadn't I been updated? And, we've talked about this a little bit before about the business of helping, right? It's still a business. And while, yes, we're here to help, we're also here to make our living. And if we don't update our resources, they're going to stop sending people to us. So then not only do we hurt our business, then we can't help people, right? So it all works like this together, right? It all ties together. I want you to hear that and understand that. A treatment center is wonderful. For me, it's got a shelf life. For other people's, they go on to open treatment centers. Talk to Professor Arrington. She runs a treatment center. She is a wonderful professional in our industry. Get to know her. But others like me, I did my time, and I did a long time, and I got out. When I got in, I thought, well, this is what I want to do. I want to help people with substance use disorders, and I loved it. I was good at running groups. I loved running groups most of the time. You'll take some group classes and understand how the group stages work. And when there's a working group, there's nothing better. And when a light bulb comes on and you help a fan, there's nothing better, right? But just the same as when it's struggling and it's like pulling teeth, it could be a little challenging, right? But that's where you'll get to interject and you'll get to use your personality and your skill and make that work. So that's exciting, right? I loved having colleagues, that I could bounce things off of, and we could meet in between sessions or groups and really process and debrief and do all that. I do miss that piece of working at a treatment center. I really do. Having the different colleagues around, from the techs to the housekeepers to the admissions people, to the business, all the whole thing, right? It was good. I enjoyed that piece, having that camaraderie, having that ability to have a professional manager or director in any direction, right, when you needed them. There was some pitfalls to working at a center for a long time. Fast pace, you don't always get paid what you'd like. But the idea is get your hours, get your experience, work on an advanced license if that's what you want to do. And then you can continue to do that. I take a lot of the things I learned from the center and use it in my private practice today. Get to know, again, these centers that are out there. And guys, look, treatment's a good way to start this career. I think everybody that's going to ask somebody to go to treatment should have an experience there. So hopefully you'll get that. I loved my time at the center. I still love working with the centers. I think, as you can tell, I'm a proponent of treatment. But again, that's case by case, and we individualize that. But I think there's a lot of good there. You'll find what you're looking for along the way, right? It may change 1,000 times. When I started, I was just happy to get a job. I stayed there 9 years. I loved doing the detox, even though working weekends. It was cool. I'd run of the place, right? It was really cool. It was a different vibe on the weekends, and I still got 3 days of the week with everybody fully staffed, so that was cool. And IOP, I love, different animal altogether, and I love that different stage, different insights, different thoughts, just a different approach. But then I was offered a marketing role. Just, you never know. Look, I'm not a marketer, or I wasn't, right? I never marketed before. I'm a counselor. And I made a joke. One of the marketers had some extra materials from some show they did or some booth they had, and wanted to come do it for a education group with our clients for IOP. So we were like, sure, they want to hear somebody new. Come on. We were talking in the back. Somebody had left or not showed up. And she said, yeah, we're shorthanded. I said, well, that's, something along the lines, that's too bad. I hear you pay more. And she said, we do. And I just kind of laughed and was like, we'll have to talk about that. Literally an hour later, I got a call from the CEO that said, I heard you're interested and we would love to have you. Literally a month later, I was marketing for the treatment center. And I didn't know I would be good at it, but it turns out I was real good at it because I was passionate about it. They just said, look, you're licensed, so you have credibility in this industry. You've worked here for 7 years already. You know what we do. You like it here. Just go tell the community about it. Okay, and here's a big raise. Okay, great. That was actually turned out to be a springboard for me to meet people in the community that I would have never had the opportunity to meet, right? I got to meet attorneys. I got to meet doctors. I got to meet nurses. I got to meet other therapists. I got to meet psychiatrists, psychologists, our community, right? Community resources. I got to broaden my resources like I would have never had the opportunity to before. I got to know the other centers. I got to tour the other centers, and all the things that I heard from other people over the years, I was finally able to make my own opinion and form my own. I got to tour the sober living facilities, right? I made my own opinion then. So it's super important. I can't stress to you enough the value of working in a treatment center. and being open to whatever they ask you to do, because it may be the best thing you ever did. I'll give you one last example is I still don't work with adolescents very often. I have one right now, and it's just a special arrangement. I don't usually work with them. The center I work treated adolescents. Wouldn't even look down that side of the hall. But then they asked me to do young adults, and I was like, oh no, that's too close to adolescents. But I agreed, and it was one of the better things I did, right? So you just never know. And now I have that ability, and it's a good thing for me. It just adds it to my toolbox, so to speak, right, of resources and things I know I'm confident in doing and competent in doing. That said, this week you have a smart recovery paper. I expect everybody to truly tighten it up this week. Do your resources, cite your resources in your work and at the end of your work. 2 full pages, 2 to 3. I don't want 4, I don't want 5, I don't want 1. 2 minimum, 3 maximum. Title pages the way they're supposed to be. If you don't know how to do a title page, there's no excuse at the halfway point. Go to the APA tab. Follow that instruction. There's 2 papers. There's a sample paper, APA 7 sample paper that shows you how to do it, and then there's a student sample paper that all you have to do is copy and paste it. Put your own information in. I mean, it doesn't get any easier. So if you don't do that, that tells me you're not listening or don't care, or just what you're okay with whatever grade. So that's up to you. But if you need help, again, I will walk you through it via Zoom, but you have to contact me. I have to assume you know, or you just are good with whatever grade, because you will lose points, right? That's how that works. You don't have to, though. That's the thing. You don't have to lose any points. It's maddening sometimes because you just give away points. I understand. I did too. I get it. So that said, smart recovery. SMART is awesome. SMART is the antithesis of AA. And this is where I want you to start hearing that all of these programs are good. SMART, Refuge, Celebrate Recovery, AA, NA, CA, AAA, MBA. I'm kidding, Al-Anon, all of them, ACA. They're all good. Kidding about AAA and MBA. But one doesn't have to be good for another to be bad. AA doesn't have to be bad for SMART to be good, and vice versa, right? SMART doesn't have to be bad for AA. They're all good. They're just not always a good fit for your clients. So you have to learn to know your client, learn what you may think is the best fit for them, talk to them, right? But you need to be knowledgeable about these programs. You don't have to be an expert at them by any means, but you need to know enough about them to have a conversation and understand that this may be a better fit for your people. Engineers, I send a lot of engineers to Smart Recovery because of the way they think. They're black and white, concrete thinkers, right? Numbers matter, those kinds of things. Cognitive behavioral therapy is what Smart Recovery is. So Smart Recovery offers all the students, I think it was, when I took it, it was $50. I'm sure it's the same, a training, because where AA, any volunteer can come up, any member can come up and run a meeting. At Smart, you have to go through their training to be able to run a meeting because they're running a particular format, and I love it. And it's just cognitive behavioral therapy. So even if you don't want to run a group, I've never ran a Smart Recovery group, but I took their training because it's just helpful as a clinician. One, helpful to understand their program, but 2, it was just helpful for the CBT knowledge, right? The cognitive behavioral therapy knowledge. I use their worksheets with almost every person I work with, regardless of what program they're in, right? I like a 12-step foundation because the reality is AA, 12-step work, NA, CA, they have the corner marketed on fellowship. They're in 15 minutes in any direction, almost in any town, right? They're everywhere. I think last I remember there was like 2,500 meetings a week in our city of Houston or in surrounding areas or somewhere in that neighborhood, 2,300, a lot of meetings, right? Some places, some groups have meetings 4 and 5 times a day. Others once a week, but there's a lot of them is what I'm saying. So you have that foundation, and I believe in the 12-step model. I think it's great, but you couple that with a Smart Recovery, and I'm not saying necessarily everybody dive in and work 2 programs, but sometimes as a supplement. Sometimes people will work Smart Recovery and then just have AA as a supplement. You'll find out what works for you or your clients, and they'll make that choice. But Smart Recovery is an amazing program. Remember, you have to fill out some little account. And if you don't do that, I've been saying this for weeks, and you can't get your paper in, that's on you. I've been saying this for weeks. But don't get frustrated, because remember, I'm going to ask you, what would you tell your clients if they came back to you and said, I'm not doing it? because it's too frustrating. It took me 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, right? Think about that. What would you tell your client? How would you encourage them to do it? These are the things you need to start thinking like, right? How would you encourage your client to do it? But you would want them to do it because there's value in it. So on these papers, please follow the guidelines. Remember, I do not want a comparison of these groups. I already know the difference in these groups. I do not want you to tell me the difference between AA and Smart Recovery. I don't want a history of Smart Recovery. I want you to attend a meeting you have never been to before, and I want you to write 2 pages about that experience. Were you nervous looking? Was it frustrating looking? Do you think it's helpful for you? Do you think it's helpful for future clients? Do you think it's hurtful for future clients? How do you think you can incorporate this as an LCDC in your practice or your treatment center or your work? How do you think it's beneficial? What was your experience of the meeting? Please don't write about one person, what they talked about. I mean, if you need to tell me about that, fine, but tell me what your experience was. Did you think what they talked about was important? Did you think it was helpful what they talked about? But don't give me a page of Sam said A, B, C, D. Please don't do that. You will lose points for that. Don't give away points, guys. Again, we're at the halfway point next week as spring break. And then you really, once this meeting's done and you write this paper, you got a sweet 2 weeks, right? You got spring break. You come back and all you have to do is a summary DB of your paper and then before your next thing. So you really got a good couple weeks to breathe, to catch up, to do whatever you need. If you're struggling, I need to hear from you. So we can do a Zoom and I'll spend as much time as you need to go over these things. But I really, really expect you to tighten up things. And I look forward to reading about your Smart Recovery papers. And yeah, man, we'll talk soon. Have a good week.